Okay, let's dive right in. I have to be honest, when I first saw the title of the source material for today's deep dive, I had a physical reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I actually, I stopped scrolling. I just froze and stared at my screen for probably a full minute before I could even process it.
I get that. It's certainly not a title that just lets you scroll past. It demands your attention.
It's more than just demanding attention. It's like it grabs you by the lapels. The title is Overwhelming Proof That God Does Not Exist.
Mm.
And my first, my gut instinct was, okay, here we go. Is this some angry atheist piece? Is this someone just trying to be edgy and tear down religion?
Yeah.
But then I actually started reading.
Mm.
And I realized that is not what this is. Not at all.
No, it's really not. And I'm glad you paused, because if you just have that knee-jerk reaction to the headline, you completely miss the fascinating and frankly rigorous intellectual exercise that's going on underneath.
Exactly. This isn't a sermon and it's not a hit piece. It feels more like, I don't know, like a legal argument.
That is the perfect analogy. I think that's exactly how he frames it. What we're looking at today is a logical, philosophical, and, as the author himself puts it, a scientific deconstruction of the very concept of a deity.
Right.
It's an attempt to strip away all the emotion, all the cultural baggage, all the sentimentality, and just look at the raw definitions that the religions themselves provide.
And the person guiding us through this sort of courtroom drama, is a fascinating character in his own right.
The analysis comes from a thinker named Osman.
Also known as the blind Muslim yogi.
The blind Muslim yogi. I mean, just stop and think about that title for a second.
It's quite a Venn diagram of identities, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those words is packed with meaning and, you'd think, potential contradictions.
It really is. You've got the Islamic background, you have the mastery of yoga, a tradition from a completely different part of the world, and then you have the fact that he is blind, which, as he suggests, gives him a different kind of sight into these big questions. And that brings us to the mission for today. We're here to unpack his central thesis. He claims that if you actually truly listen to what science, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism are saying at their core, if you strip away all that emotion we talked about, they all, surprisingly, agree on one thing.
The non-existence of a God entity.
Precisely. It's an incredibly bold claim.
It is. So I think we need to set the ground rules right now for everyone listening. We are not here to tell you what to believe. We are not taking a side.
No.
Our role today is as impartial observers. We're sitting in the gallery of Osman's courtroom. We're going to examine the evidence he presents, weigh the probabilities as he lays them out, and just try to understand the chain of logic he uses to get to this very startling conclusion.
Exactly. We are reporting on his synthesis. Whether you leave this deep dive agreeing with him or, completely disagreeing, the goal is for you to understand the argument itself. Because honestly, it forces you to get really clear on what you even mean when you use the word God.
Okay, so let's get into it. But before we can even touch the argument, we have to talk about the messenger. We have to talk about Osman. Because his biography is, it's intense. And I think to really get the argument, you have to understand the man who's making it.
It is intense, and it's absolutely crucial context. He's not just some armchair philosopher. Osman is a bioenergy healer, and he operates at what he describes as a master level.
And he's not new to this. He states he's been practicing healing, yoga, and meditation for 50 years.
50 years. 50. Just let that sink in. That is half a century of deep, dedicated work.
We talk a lot about that 10,000-hour rule, right? The Malcolm Gladwell idea that it takes 10,000 hours to achieve mastery in something. Osman is probably closer to 100,000 hours.
Oh, easily. The dedication is just staggering. And the notes say he attained his first samadhi experience by the age of 19.
Okay, let's unpack that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
For those listening who might not be familiar, or maybe you only know yoga as, the workout you do at the gym, what is samadhi?
Samadhi is, it's considered the pinnacle of the yogic path. It's a state of intense concentration, sometimes called absorption. It's described as a state of oneness where the distinction between the person meditating and the object of their meditation completely dissolves.
So it's not just feeling calm.
Not even close. It's a profound, altered state of consciousness. To achieve that at 19 is, it's remarkable. It suggests a kind of precocious, once-in-a-generation talent for this kind of inner work.
It makes me think of Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi.
A classic, absolutely.
Yogananda talks about these states of cosmic consciousness. And he's very clear. He doesn't describe them as hallucinations or dreams. He describes them as stepping into a higher, more fundamental order of reality.
Right. And Osman claiming a samadhi experience at 19 puts him directly in that lineage of serious, lifelong practitioners. He's not a tourist in these realms. He's a native.
And he didn't just stay in one lane, either.
Hmm.
His bio says he studied extensively across different schools of thought, the Far East, the Middle East, the West. But what really jumped out at me is how he insists on framing his work. He explicitly corrects a term in his notes.
I saw that too. It's very important to him.
He doesn't want to be seen as a mystic. He insists on a scientific approach. The prompt originally had the word centurion, and he corrected it to scientific.
And that's a crucial distinction for him. He views these ancient practices, yoga, meditation, energy work, not as some kind of hocus pocus or magic, but as a lost science. His whole mission, as he puts it, is to simplify these incredibly complex protocols to make them result-based.
He wants to know what works, reliably and effectively.
It's interesting because you're seeing this cultural shift happening right now. You look at someone like Professor Andrew Huberman from Stanford.
Oh yeah, the Huberman Lab podcast.
Exactly. He talks about things like non-sleep deep rest, which is basically yoga nidra, or he'll discuss specific breathing protocols for focus or relaxation. He's taking these ancient techniques and stripping them down to their neurobiological mechanisms.
And Osman seems to be doing the exact same thing, just from the other direction. He's not an academic looking in. He's the master practitioner looking out, trying to explain the science of what he's been doing for 50 years.
That's a great way to put it. He's looking for the mechanism of action. And he applies this to really serious stuff. He specializes in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses. He even talks about using telepathic healing based on principles of quantum entanglement.
Okay, quantum entanglement. That's a heavy concept to just drop into a conversation about healing.
It is, but if you listen to discussions on, say, the Buddha at the Gas Pump podcast with Rick Archer, or you hear someone like Deepak Chopra speak, this is the frontier they're all exploring.
Right, the idea that consciousness isn't just local.
Exactly. It's not just locked inside your skull. The argument is that if consciousness is a fundamental field, like the quantum field, then theoretically one mind can interact with and affect another at a distance. Osman is claiming he uses this principle as a practical tool for healing.
And he's very specific about it being a complement to traditional medicine, not a replacement.
Which is a very important and responsible disclaimer. He's not saying don't go to your doctor. He's saying medicine is brilliant at treating the biochemistry. I work with the bioenergy. It's an additive approach.
But the dedication required to do this work. I mean, he mentions that at certain stages of his life, he practiced up to 18 hours a day.
18 hours a day. That's the kind of dedication you hear about from, world-class concert pianists or Olympic athletes. It's a level of focus that is almost unimaginable for most of us.
And even now, he says he practices a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day, and I love this phrase, sharpening the sword.
Sharpening the sword. That phrase tells you everything. It's not a gift that was bestowed upon him. It's a skill. It's a tool that he has to meticulously maintain and refine every single day without fail.
It's pure discipline. It reminds me of the teachings of someone like Swami Sivananda of the Divine Life Society. Sivananda was actually a medical doctor before he became a monk, and he brought that same rigorous, systematic approach to spirituality.
Right. It was a step-by-step process. Osman is living that process day in and day out. And that incredible work ethic is why he's very upfront about the fact that his private services are premium.
Yeah, he makes it clear in his bio, his one-on-one treatments and consultations are not inexpensive.
And you can understand why. If you're going to a master neurosurgeon who has spent 50 years perfecting a life-saving technique, you expect to pay for that lifetime of expertise. You're not just paying for the hour of surgery, you're paying for the 50 years that make that hour possible.
That makes sense. But, and this is great for us and for you listening, he offers the knowledge part, the philosophy, for free. He has a YouTube channel that's just called The Blind Muslim Yogi.
Right. And a podcast on Apple and Spotify under the same name. So while the direct application, the energy healing itself, is a paid service you can find on his website, yogawellness786.com.
And that's Yoga Wellness, all one word, 786.com.
Correct. While that's a paid service, the actual logic and philosophy we're about to dive into, he puts all of that out there for everyone. He says he doesn't withhold any information on his YouTube channel. His mission is to democratize the knowledge, even if the specialized service is premium.
Okay, so that's the man. A blind Muslim yogi who is deeply spiritual but insists on being scientific. A master healer who has dedicated his entire life to this work. Now, Let's get to his argument.
Let's do it. The courtroom is in session.
He starts with one simple rule. If we're going to have this conversation, if we're going to try and determine if God exists, what's the very first thing we have to do?
We have to remove emotion. Osman is absolutely clear on this. He says, let's not get emotional, which is a huge ask.
It's almost everything, right? For most people, their belief or disbelief in God is a feeling, a hope, a fear, a part of their cultural identity.
Exactly. And Osman says, for this exercise, you have to put all of that in a box and set it aside. We need to look at this coldly, logically, like a scientist examining a specimen.
Okay, so we're putting our feelings aside. We're now Spock. We're stepping into the laboratory. Where's his starting point?
He starts with science. This is his baseline, the scientific community.
Yeah.
The scientific method is fundamentally based on one thing: empirical evidence. Can you observe it? Can you measure it? Can you weigh it? Can you formulate a hypothesis and then test it with a repeatable experiment?
And when you apply that entire framework to the concept of God?
The answer is, inevitably, no. There is no empirical evidence. There is no data point you can put on a chart, no photograph, no chemical signature that proves a God entity exists.
So from a purely scientific standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. Science says, show me the proof. And because there's no physical measurable proof, science has to default to.
Does not exist. In science, the burden of proof is always on the person making the positive claim. If I tell you there's an invisible dragon in my garage, it's my job to prove it's there. It's not your job to prove that it isn't.
The Carl Sagan principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Precisely. So without any evidence, the scientific verdict is clear. Non-existence. Case closed from that perspective.
Okay, so that's the first witness in his courtroom, science. And that's the easy one, in a way. I think most people, religious or not, would agree that science and faith are asking different questions or using different tools.
Right.
But this is where Osman's argument gets really interesting. He doesn't stop there. He pivots to Islam. Now, he's a Muslim. You'd expect him to say, okay, science misses the point, but here's where the Quran proves God's existence.
That would be the standard apologetic argument, yes. But he does the complete opposite. He takes the definitions from within Islam and puts them under that same cold, logical microscope.
So what's the core definition he focuses on?
He focuses on the central Islamic concept that God is al-Ghaib, the unseen. And more than that, that God is inconceivable. The absolute core dogma states that God was never born and does not give birth. God is not physical. God is not made of matter. God does not occupy a specific space.
Okay, that's pretty standard theology so far.
It is. But now follow the logic with him, Osman argues. If something is truly, literally inconceivable, meaning the human mind cannot form a concept of it, and it's not physical, it's not concrete, it has no form, it's not formless, it has no location, then in a practical, logical, scientific sense, what is that a description of?
If I can't see it, or touch it, or measure it, or even properly think about it.
Osman's conclusion is that this is a functional description of something that does not exist.
Whoa, okay, that is a massive pivot from traditional interpretation.
It's huge. He says, look at the words, not existing and not non-existence. It's a paradox. But if you take that paradoxical description into a court of law or into a laboratory and you say, I have this thing, it has no attributes, it's not in any place, you can't conceive of it, it wasn't born, the judge and the scientists are going to look at you and say,
so it doesn't exist.
So it doesn't exist. He's making this really bold claim. He says the traditional interpretation where believers say inconceivable means too great for my mind to grasp is an emotional response. He's saying if you look at it logically, the definition itself maps closer to nothingness or non-existence in our tangible reality than it does to a thing or an entity.
He's taking the via negativa, that theological tradition of defining God only by what God is not, and he's taking it to its absolute final logical conclusion.
That is a perfect way to put it. He's not saying the Quran is wrong. He's saying our interpretation that the Quran is describing a guy in the sky is wrong. He's arguing the text itself describes something that functionally isn't an entity.
It's like he's saying the scripture is more sophisticated than the believers.
In a way, yes. He's suggesting the scripture points to a reality so far beyond personhood that calling it an existing God is actually a downgrade.
Okay, so witness 1, science, says no proof. Witness 2, Islam, says inconceivable, which Osman argues is functionally equivalent to non-existent. Where does he go next?
He moves on to Hinduism, or more correctly, Sanatana Dharma. And here he really shows his depth of study because he breaks it down into different levels, which is a very traditional way of understanding it.
He talks about the lower levels first, right? The idea of Dvaita or dualism.
Yes, and he's not dismissive of it. He says this is for, in his words, regular people, people who need something tangible to connect with. And in this dualistic phase, you have forms. You have names. You have deities like Vishnu, Shiva, Shakti. You have statues, stories, rituals.
This is the Hinduism that most people in the West are familiar with. You know, the colorful imagery, the many different gods.
Exactly. And Osman acknowledges that's a valid and important part of the path. But he points out, in the deeper philosophy of Vedanta, this is considered a stepping stone. It's a preparatory stage. The ultimate conclusion, the highest level of wisdom in Sanatana Dharma, is Advaita.
Advaita Vedanta.
Non-dualism.
Non-dualism. The realization that reality is not two, it is one indivisible whole. And in that ultimate state of Advaita, the supreme reality, called Brahman, is described in terms very different from the gods of the lower levels. It is beyond form. It is even beyond formlessness. It is not a he. It is not a she.
We're back to that beyond language again. Inconceivable.
We are. The highest wisdom of Hinduism says that the ultimate is nirguna without qualities or attributes. Osman's logic kicks in again. If the ultimate reality has no attributes, if it is not a separate entity from you or from creation, if it is just a state of pure undifferentiated oneness, then logically, a God entity separate from that oneness
Does not exist.
It does not exist. The concept of a separate God is seen as part of the illusion that needs to be transcended. This connects directly to the teachings of figures like Sri Ramakrishna.
Absolutely. Ramakrishna famously practiced not just different paths within Hinduism, but also Islam and Christianity. And his conclusion was that they were all different paths leading to the same tank of water. But that water, that ultimate experience, wasn't a person. It was an experience of the absolute, what he called Satchitananda existence, consciousness, bliss.
And his disciple, Swami Vivekananda, who brought these ideas to the West, he didn't preach worship of a specific Hindu deity. He preached a universal religion based on the Vedantic principle of the divine oneness of all beings.
Right. Osman is standing firmly in that tradition. He's essentially saying that Hinduism itself, at its highest peak, admits that the personal God you pray to is a kind of beginner's tool, a mental construct. The ultimate truth is the non-existence of any separate entity.
Okay, so that's science, Islam, and the highest level of Hinduism, all seeming to point, in his analysis, to no entity. What about Buddhism?
For Osman, Buddhism is the most straightforward of the bunch. He seems to appreciate its directness.
He says they call a spade a spade.
They do. Buddhism is famously non-theistic. The historical Buddha was asked these big metaphysical questions about a creator God, and he either remained silent or he actively discouraged such speculation as unhelpful to the path of liberation.
So there are no logical gymnastics required here, no need to interpret inconceivable.
None at all. Osman says the modern consensus on Buddhism is clear and simple. There is no God. They don't wrap it in layers of beyond form or paradox. They just say, nope, that concept is not part of the system.
If you listen to modern Buddhist teachers or even secular mindfulness proponents, this is central. The goal is not to find God. It's often framed as understanding the nature of the mind and reality directly.
Right. Or look at the core Buddhist doctrine of anatta, or no self. The idea is that there is no permanent, unchanging soul or self. If there's no permanent self in you, the idea of a permanent supreme self or God becomes logically incoherent within that framework.
It's really interesting because the common interfaith approach is to try and find the similarities, to say, oh, they all believe in the same God, they just use different names.
Yes.
But Osman is doing a kind of opposite syncretism. He's saying, no, if you look at their highest truths, they all believe in the same duth.
No God.
That is a brilliant way to put it. He is unifying them through negation.
Yeah.
He's arguing that if you listen carefully, they are all whispering the same secret. The anthropomorphic, personal God, the king on the throne in the sky, isn't there.
So now we have the full list of witnesses for his case. We have science, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And then, of course, the fifth group.
The atheists. They're the easy vote for his argument. They've been saying God does not exist from the very beginning.
So now we enter the final phase, the court of law. This is the central metaphor of his entire deep dive. He asks us to just weigh the probabilities.
Like a judge or a jury in a civil case, you look at the evidence presented on both sides. So on one side of the scale, you have the plaintiff, the party, claiming that God does exist as a distinct entity. In Osman's analysis, who is the main representative for this position?
In his framing, the one major world faith that most strongly insists on the existence of a personal, interactive God is Christianity.
He mentions the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and specifically Jesus walking the earth.
Yes, he grants that Christianity makes this claim very explicitly. They say he was here, he was born, he lived, he is a person, he exists. So that goes on one side of the scale.
And on the other side of the
Kind of a
case.
counter argument.
On the other side, you have the defense. You stack up all the other witnesses. You have science saying no empirical evidence. You have Islam saying inconceivable, which he argues is functionally non-existent. You have the highest level of Hinduism saying non-dual, meaning no separate entity. You have Buddhism saying explicit non-existence. And you have atheism agreeing with all of them.
When you lay it out like that on a scale,
Yeah.
it's heavily weighted to one side. Osman argues it's overwhelming. He even puts a number on it. He says the margin is 80% or more in favor of non-existence.
The preponderance of the evidence, as they say in court.
That's exactly the phrase he's leaning on. Based on the balance of probabilities, if you look at the core definitions provided by the majority of human wisdom traditions and science, he argues the only logical verdict you can reach is God does not exist.
It is a genuinely staggering conclusion to hear from a man who identifies as a Muslim and a yogi.
It is, but, and this is the most important part of the entire deep dive, I think, we have to be incredibly precise about what he means by that. When Osman says God does not exist, is he saying there is nothing? Is he a nihilist?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Is he just a materialist at the end of the day? Is he saying we're just, meat robots living on a rock in a meaningless universe?
And the answer is an emphatic, absolute no. And this is crucial for you to understand. Go back to his bio. This is a man who deals in bioenergy, who claims to use telepathy and quantum entanglement for healing, who has experienced samadhi. He believes in a reality far beyond what a materialist scientist would ever accept.
So what's the distinction? How can he believe in something like telepathic healing, but not in God?
The distinction, and it's the key to his whole philosophy, is entity versus mechanism, or you could say personality versus force.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's a really important difference.
What Osman seems to be rejecting is the anthropomorph God, the God with a personality, the king, the judge, the father, the being that you pray to, that you bargain with, that gets angry or shows mercy. He's saying that concept of a supernatural person is unproven and logically inconsistent with the highest teachings. But he clearly, absolutely believes in a power, a force, an intelligence or an energy that permeates the universe and can be accessed for things like healing. He calls it bioenergy. He connects it to the principles of quantum physics.
So the non-existence he's talking about refers to the personhood of God, not to the fundamental mystery or power of the universe itself.
Exactly. That is the perfect way to phrase it. When he says Islam defines God as inconceivable, he's not saying the inconceivable isn't real. He's saying it's not a person you can name and put in a box called God. It's a field. It's a law of nature. It's a universal energy.
That brings it right back to his scientific mission. It's like you don't pray to the law of gravity.
Perfect analogy.
But gravity is absolutely real.
Yeah.
It governs everything. You don't worship it. You learn its laws, and you work with it to build bridges or fly airplanes.
Yes. You don't sing hymns to electricity, but you respect it, and if you understand its principles, voltage, amperage, resistance, you can light up the entire world. Osman treats spirituality like it's electricity. He wants to know the operating principles. He doesn't want to sing songs to the electron. He wants to harness the electron to heal someone with a terminal illness.
And that connects directly back to that note in his bio about simplifying complex protocols to get results. Maybe he believes that if you strip away all the religious baggage, the rituals, the prayers to a specific deity, the cultural traditions, and you just focus on the core mechanism, maybe you get results more efficiently.
That is his entire pitch. He's saying, stop getting emotional about the label God and start learning the technology of consciousness.
It reminds me of the work of Gopi Krishna. He wrote extensively about his Kundalini awakening. He didn't frame it as a gift from the gods. He tried to argue it was a biological process, a psychophysiological mechanism for human evolution.
Yes, very much in that same camp. Or, to bring it to a more mainstream example, think about someone like Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. That's an interesting connection. How do you see that?
Well, what does Tony Robbins talk about? He talks about state. He talks about the science of achievement. He doesn't tell you to pray for success. He gives you a protocol. change your physiology, change your focus, change your language. He treats human potential as a mechanism that can be understood and mastered.
Right. It's a results-based methodology.
Exactly. Osman is applying that exact same results-based logic to the spiritual and healing realms. It's about methodology, not blind belief. It's about what works.
You know, it also makes me think about his blindness in this context.
Tell me more. What's the connection you're seeing?
Well, he's so focused on stripping away emotion and looking at the cold, hard logic. When you're blind, you can't be seduced by the surface appearance of things. The entire world of forms, statues, cathedrals, religious art, sacred texts, that's all primarily visual.
That's a really profound point.
If you take away the visual input, what are you left with? You're left with energy, feeling, vibration, logic. Maybe his blindness made it easier for him to discard the form of God and focus entirely on the underlying force.
The blind Muslim yogi. The title isn't a contradiction at all. It might be the very source of his unique insight.
It really might be. And all of this brings us to the big so what? Why should you, listening to this on your way to work, care about this deep logical exercise?
Yes. What is the practical application of this verdict of non-existence?
I think this is what he's getting at, it's about freedom.
Freedom from what?
Freedom from conflict. If you're a person who is stuck trying to believe in a guy in the sky, because that's what you were taught, but your logical, rational mind finds it impossible to accept, you live in a state of constant cognitive dissonance. You feel like a failure or a bad person. Osman is essentially saying, hey, relax. Your logic is correct. You should reject that idea. In fact, the deepest wisdom of the religions themselves rejects that idea too.
So it resolves that war between your head and your heart.
Exactly. It allows you to be a deeply spiritual person without having to suspend your intellect. You can fully acknowledge there is no old man on a cloud, and yet still dive headfirst into exploring the profound mysteries of consciousness, energy, healing, and connection.
It shifts you from belief to experience.
Yes, from I hope God exists to I am directly experiencing a reality that is powerful and real, even if it is inconceivable.
And for Osman, that experience has to be practical. It has to show up in your life. He mentions in his bio that this isn't just abstract philosophy. It should benefit your health, your peace of mind, your social life, your relationships, even your finances.
Because if you stop waiting for an external deity to intervene and save you, and instead you start learning the laws of this universal energy.
You take back your agency. You become the scientist in the laboratory of your own life. You start sharpening the sword.
There's that phrase again. I just love it. It frames consciousness not as a thing you have, but as a tool you wield.
A tool that requires constant maintenance, 8 to 10 hours a day of it, in his case.
Which, let's be realistic, most of us are not going to do.
No. But we can learn from the person who has. And that brings us back to the resources he offers. If this line of thinking intrigues you, this blend of hard logic and deep spirituality, Osman has laid out a path.
Right. So first there's the free stuff, the YouTube channel, The Blind Muslim Yogi. That's where he unpacks these ideas, gives advice, shares techniques.
And his podcasts on Apple and Spotify, same name, that's the foundation. And then for those who want to go deeper or who have specific needs, particularly around health, there's his website.
YogaWellness786.com. And he is very clear, the one-on-one services are premium. But again, it's justified by that half-century of intensive practice and his high success rate.
It's the difference between reading a book about flying a plane and hiring a veteran pilot to fly you through a storm. You're paying for the experience that knows how to navigate.
He also mentions a Patreon channel for paid lessons, so there seem to be different tiers of engagement. You can listen for free, you can pay to learn the techniques, or you can engage him for direct healing work.
And it's worth repeating his responsible disclaimer one more time. He positions his work as a complement to medicine, not a replacement. He's not telling anyone to stop their medical treatments. He's saying, let's add this powerful tool to your existing toolkit.
Okay, so we've sat through the trial. We've heard the testimony from science, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. According to the judge in this courtroom, Osman, the verdict is in the case of the God entity.
The verdict does not exist.
But the inconceivable remains.
And that's a powerful, lingering thought, isn't it?
It is. You know, normally when you hear the phrase God doesn't exist, it can feel like the lights are being turned off. It can feel cold, empty, nihilistic. But the way Osman frames it, it feels expansive.
It feels vast. The word inconceivable is so much bigger and more mysterious than the word king.
Exactly. A king lives in a castle. He has a defined form and location. the inconceivable. It fits nowhere, so it can be everywhere.
And there's a paradox. By logically proving that God does not exist as a limited entity, he might be pointing us toward a reality that is far more intimate and ever-present than any separate thing could ever be.
It makes me think of that Rumi quote. Since we're talking about Muslim mystics, it feels appropriate. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
Beautiful. Osman is basically saying, out beyond ideas of existence and non-existence, there is a field. That's where the real work happens.
And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway for all of us. We get so hung up on the binary question. Do you believe in God? Yes or no? And Osman's whole argument is that it's the wrong question.
The right question might be, can you learn to perceive and interact with the fundamental reality that's right here, right now, even if your mind can never fully grasp or name it?
So here's our final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. If the highest wisdom of Islam, Hinduism, science, and Buddhism all seem to agree that the ultimate is inconceivable and beyond form, why do we spend so much energy and so much violence fighting over the form?
Why do we go to war over different names for something that is, by definition, nameless?
Exactly. Maybe this non-existence that Osman talks about isn't an emptiness to be feared. Maybe it's the only true common ground, the point of unity.
If nobody can own God because God isn't an entity to be owned, then maybe we all share the same source.
Something to think about. If you want to hear more of this logic directly from the man himself, please go and check out The Blind Muslim Yogi on YouTube.
It's a deep rabbit hole, and it's definitely worth exploring.
And just remember, we're the court reporters here. We're just bringing you the arguments from Osman's trial. We'd love to know what your personal verdict is.
Indeed. Court adjourned.
Court adjourned. Thanks for diving in deep with us today.
Take care.